Welcome to Sleepy Stories, a place where history meets rest. Here we share gentle, soothing tales about the lives of remarkable historical figures. From inventors and explorers to artists and leaders, each story is told slowly, softly, and with a calming rhythm, designed to ease your mind and guide you into sleep. Whether you want to unwind after a busy day, relax before bed, or simply enjoy peaceful storytelling, Sleepy Stories will be your companion for a restful night. So, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let history help you drift into dreams. Tonight, we travel back to ancient Egypt, a land of golden sands, flowing rivers, and towering monuments. Our story is about Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, a woman of intelligence, charm, and courage, whose life was filled with intrigue, alliances, and the delicate balance of power. But beyond the legends and the grandeur, this is the story of a young girl who grew up to shape history in ways that are still remembered today. So, get comfortable, let your body relax, and join me as we softly explore the life and journey of Cleopatra. Cleopatra VII Philopator was born in 69 BCE in the city of Alexandria, the jewel of Egypt, where the sun poured golden light over white stone buildings and the air carried the fragrance of the Mediterranean and the Nile. She was the daughter of Pharaoh Ptolemy, a man whose lineage traced back through generations of the Ptolemaic dynasty and whose rule had known both triumph and turbulence. Even as a young child, Cleopatra felt the weight of history resting softly upon her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a quiet river that would carry her gently toward her destiny. The Nile was her constant companion. Its waters shimmered like glass in the morning sun, silvered in the soft glow of the moon at night. Each ripple seemed to whisper secrets older than any palace, older than any stone, older than Alexandria itself. She would kneel by its banks, small hands brushing the cool water, watching the schools of fish flash beneath the surface like living jewels. Sometimes she traced patterns in the sand, watching them vanish as the gentle current erased each mark. The river was a teacher, a patient guide, flowing endlessly through time and memory. Her mother watched her closely, walking beside her in the gardens or along the river's edge, guiding her without rush, without force. "The Nile carries everything, Cleopatra," she would say, her voice calm and measured, "and it forgets nothing. Learn from it. Learn patience, learn balance, learn the quiet strength that comes from understanding." Cleopatra nodded, absorbing not only the words, but the feeling of their calm rhythm. The lessons were everywhere, in the whispering reeds, the bending palms, the gentle lap of water against the shore. Her childhood days were filled with both play and study, each gently interwoven, neither rushed nor forced. Tutors spoke to her softly, reading from scrolls, teaching her the languages of Greece and Egypt, showing her how to trace letters and numbers with careful precision. She learned history, memorized the stories of past pharaohs, of dynasties rising and falling, of gods and mortals intertwined. She learned mathematics, astronomy, and the philosophy of distant lands. Each lesson was delivered in quiet tones, the words lingering in the air like soft incense, sinking slowly into her mind. The palace gardens were her sanctuary. Lotus blossoms floated in shaded pools, their petals opening wide to the sun, while jasmine and roses released their fragrance into the warm air. Cleopatra would wander softly, running her fingers along leaves, counting petals, feeling the textures of the soil and the smooth stone of fountains beneath her touch. She learned the patience of growth, the quiet observation of life, the gentle rhythm of tending and waiting. Even her siblings, including her brothers Ptolemy III and Ptolemy IV, sometimes played beside her, their laughter echoing softly, a bright but gentle counterpoint to the quiet of her observations. The palace itself moved in quiet rhythms. Servants passed silently along the corridors, arranging linens, lighting lamps, opening windows to let in the breeze. Cleopatra learned to observe without judgment, to absorb detail without urgency, noticing the small patterns of movement and care that kept the palace running. The rituals of palace life, though elaborate, were softened by their repetition and their rhythm. Meals taken in quiet, hands washing with warm scented water, scrolls read by candlelight, the soft shuffle of feet along stone floors. All of this became part of her education, teaching her grace, composure, and subtle influence. At night, she would lie by her window, the Nile reflecting the stars above, a silver river under a black sky flecked with countless points of light. The air was cool and scented with the river and the gardens, carrying the distant murmur of Alexandria settling into evening. She imagined floating on the river, drifting past distant lands she would one day know, carried by the steady current, the flow of water that had travelled across deserts and through villages, past temples and cities, carrying all the calm and all the history of Egypt within its waters. Her father would sometimes sit with her by the banks, speaking softly not of crowns or the burdens of rule, but of the river, the stars, the slow unfolding of life. "The Nile teaches what no teacher can," he said, his voice low, echoing faintly across the water. "Watch it, Cleopatra. Learn from it. It is steady. It is patient. It holds all that comes and all that goes." She listened, absorbing the stillness between his words as much as the words themselves, feeling the rhythm of patience sink into her bones. Her play followed the same gentle patterns. Dolls were carefully lined, figurines set into imagined courts, stones stacked in small towers. Each movement was deliberate, each arrangement thoughtful. The palace, the gardens, the river, and even the palace animals became teachers, whispering quiet lessons of observation, careful thought, and the subtle power of calm influence. She learned to see the connections between things, the way water shaped stone over centuries, the way the wind bent the reeds without breaking them, the way her own small actions left ripples that faded but mattered. Even as she slept, the lessons continued. The pillow beneath her head, the scent of the gardens drifting in through open windows, the cool sheets brushing her skin, the whisper of the Nile, all became part of her education, all part of the slow, meditative preparation for a life that would stretch beyond her childhood. She dreamed gently of the river, of the flowing water carrying her forward, of Alexandria and the gardens, of the stars reflected in silver streams. And so, Cleopatra grew within the calm embrace of the Nile and the palace, learning the quiet strengths of observation, patience, and gentle wisdom. Her birth in 69 BCE marked the beginning of a life intertwined with the river, with Alexandria, with the gardens, with the quiet rhythms of the world around her. Each day was a small step in understanding, each breath a gentle flow toward the woman she would one day become, the last Pharaoh of Egypt. And now, as you imagine her drifting by the Nile, surrounded by gardens, guided by tutors, cradled by history and water alike, you may let yourself float with her, carried gently towards sleep, carried softly by the endless rhythm of the river and the night. Cleopatra grew within the soft embrace of the palace, her life a quiet rhythm of study, observation, and reflection. From her earliest years, she was known not only for her beauty, but for her keen mind, a mind that absorbed knowledge like the Nile absorbs the sunlight, gently, steadily, endlessly. She learned many languages, not as a task, but as a slow unfolding, a meditation. She spoke Greek, the language of her family and court, Egyptian, the language of her people, and she would one day learn parts of Hebrew, Aramaic, and even the languages of distant lands, soft syllables rolling over her tongue like water flowing over smooth stones. Her tutors were patient, speaking in soft, measured tones, their voices blending with the rustle of palms and the murmur of the Nile beyond the palace walls. They taught her philosophy, science, and mathematics. She traced letters and numbers with careful fingers, each stroke deliberate, each curve remembered. The lessons were long, yet gentle, stretching across hours that moved as slowly as the river itself. She learned to read the stars, to measure the passage of time through the sun's arc and the moon's glow, to calculate the cycles of the planets. Each discovery was a ripple in her mind, small at first, then expanding, spreading outward, soft and quiet. She wandered the gardens often, feeling the petals of flowers, counting the veins in leaves, watching the small animals that moved unseen. These moments were as much lessons as her tutor's words, teaching her observation, patience, and the subtle flow of life. She learned to notice patterns, to see how one small movement could create a ripple across space and time. Even the water in the palace fountains became a teacher. The way it curved around stone, the way it sang softly as it fell, the way it mirrored the sky above. Cleopatra's intelligence was not only in the words she learned, but in the way she absorbed the world around her. She noticed the expression of a servant, the posture of her siblings, the alignment of the sun over the city. She listened to the whisper of the Nile, the rustle of reeds, the distant laughter of children at play. In all of this, she discovered strategy, empathy, and understanding. Knowledge was not only in scrolls and tutors, it was in the river, in the gardens, in the soft, unhurried rhythms of life around her. Her mother and father encouraged her curiosity, allowing her to explore freely within the palace and the surrounding gardens. Sometimes her studies were interrupted by moments of quiet wonder, a bird landing on a fountain, the shimmer of scales on a fish in the Nile, a flower slowly opening in the morning sun. These interruptions were never distractions, only extensions of her education, teaching her that knowledge and beauty could coexist, flowing together as the river flowed to the sea. In her quiet chambers, she would sometimes lie on cushions and imagine distant lands. She dreamed of cities beyond Egypt, of markets filled with the scent of spices, of mountains and rivers she had never seen. Her imagination wandered without urgency, drifting as gently as a boat on the Nile. She learned from her dreams as much as from her tutors, understanding that observation and reflection were as important as language and numbers. Even her play reflected her mind's careful attention. Dolls were arranged in orderly patterns, figurines lined up as if in miniature courts, small towers of stones built with precise care. Each game, each arrangement, each imagined conversation taught her the value of planning, patience, and attention to detail. These small exercises became the foundation of her future abilities as a ruler. Intelligence tempered by calm, strategy softened by observation, power balanced with understanding. She listened to stories of the Ptolemaic dynasty, of the gods, and of the rulers who had come before her. Each story unfolded slowly, a river of knowledge winding through her mind, connecting the past to the present. She remembered the lessons of her father. Patience is power, Cleopatra. Observation is wisdom. Let the world flow around you, and you will understand it. She repeated these words quietly in her mind, letting them sink like stones in the river of her thoughts. Evenings in Alexandria were calm. The sun would set in a slow, golden glow, the Nile reflecting pink and silver hues. The palace gardens would grow quiet, fountains trickling softly, flowers closing their petals for the night. Cleopatra would sit by her window or wander along the terraces, letting the evening air fill her lungs, listening to the distant hum of the city. The world moved around her, steady and endless, teaching her the rhythm of life, the cycle of day and night, the continuity of existence. By night she would lie upon her mattress, cushions and pillows supporting her small frame. She breathed deeply, matching the rhythm of her pulse to the flow of the Nile outside her window. Her thoughts, full of words, numbers, and observations, began to soften, blending with the gentle whisper of the river, the hush of the gardens, the quiet of the palace halls. Sleep came slowly, as it always did, a gentle drift into the calm, carrying her into dreams where the world flowed as it always had, steady, endless, patient. And so Cleopatra grew, learning not only from tutors and scrolls, but from the river, the gardens, the palace, and the quiet rhythm of life around her. Each lesson, each observation, each gentle moment became part of the foundation of a ruler whose mind would one day be as sharp as it was calm, whose wisdom would be as deep as the Nile, whose patience would carry her through the challenges of a life that was destined to be remembered for millennia. And now, as you breathe slowly, imagining the young Cleopatra listening to the whispers of the Nile, tracing the veins of leaves, counting petals, learning languages, watching the stars, you may follow her mind gently into the quiet current of sleep, floating softly, carried by the endless river of calm. Cleopatra VII became Queen of Egypt in 51 BCE at the age of 18. The Palace of Alexandria, filled with sunlight, marble and gardens, became the stage for a life she had been preparing for in quiet observation and gentle study. She did not enter the role in haste. She entered it with patience, with awareness, with a mind shaped by years of learning beside the Nile, among scrolls, tutors, and gardens. Her early days as queen were filled with rituals both elaborate and gentle, each carrying the weight of history but tempered by the calm rhythm she had known since childhood. She learned to navigate the corridors of power not with urgency, but with careful attention. The advisors, the priests, the attendants, the scribes, all moved around her like pieces in a river's flow, each gesture meaningful, each movement a lesson in subtlety and observation. Cleopatra shared the throne with her younger brother, Ptolemy III, as tradition demanded, though the balance of influence gradually shifted toward her. She learned the delicate art of diplomacy quietly, noticing expressions, listening to the pauses between words, feeling the currents of thought that ran beneath every conversation. Her words, when spoken, were measured, precise, carrying both wisdom and calm authority. She spent hours in the palace libraries, surrounded by scrolls that contained centuries of knowledge. She read history, philosophy, medicine, and astronomy. Her mind absorbed facts and patterns alike. The reigns of past pharaohs, the cycles of the stars, the medicines that could heal the body, the laws that governed the land. Each scroll, each lesson, each quiet hour became a thread in the tapestry of her future power. Her education was not limited to books. She observed the workings of the court, the rituals of governance, and the flow of trade along the Nile. Ships arrived with goods from distant lands, papyrus from the south, perfumes from Arabia, spices from India, silks from the east. She learned not only the value of these commodities, but the value of relationships, negotiation, and patience. She understood that leadership was not a rush to power, but a river to navigate, moving steadily and with purpose. In her private chambers, she would sometimes reflect on the weight of her new role. The palace gardens offered solace, fountains trickling, flowers in bloom, birds moving softly among the trees. She walked slowly, noting the shapes of leaves, the colors of blossoms, the soft hum of insects and bees. In these gentle moments, she practiced the art of stillness, learning to balance the constant demands of rule with the calm that allowed her mind to remain clear and steady. Even her clothing and adornment followed the rhythm of calm care. Linen and fine fabrics were draped with precision, jewelry chosen not for extravagance, but for elegance and subtle influence. Each decision, each action, each step was deliberate, measured, a reflection of the mind that had grown wise through patient observation and quiet study. At night, Cleopatra would sit by her window overlooking the Nile, watching the moonlight shimmer on the water. She remembered her childhood along these same banks, her lessons by the river, the way the water had taught her patience and calm. She felt the current flow beneath her gaze, carrying all that had been and all that would come, guiding her gently into dreams where the palace, the river, and the gardens were one harmonious whole. Even as she slept, she considered her responsibilities quietly, the needs of her people, the rituals of governance, the careful balance of power with her brother, the observance of traditions older than any living memory. Sleep was not escape, but preparation, a gentle drift into renewal, a meditation on the day past and the days yet to come. Her advisors spoke of politics, trade, and diplomacy, but she absorbed it all in the quiet manner she had learned as a child. She watched their expressions, noted the pauses, the gestures, the subtle shifts in tone. Every meeting became a lesson in human nature, patience, and strategy. She understood that knowledge was not only in scrolls but in observation, in listening, in quiet awareness. The palace gardens became a place of reflection. She would walk slowly among the fountains, tracing the paths of water as it curved around stone, listening to its soft murmur, noticing the subtle motion of leaves and petals in the breeze. Here, she planned not battles or campaigns, but the gentle shaping of her own presence. The way she spoke, the way she moved, the way she listened. Each step was slow, deliberate, careful, flowing like the Nile itself. Even her evenings followed a rhythm. After her duties, she would bathe in warm water scented with herbs, lie upon cushions, and allow her mind to drift. The moonlight poured through the windows, silvering the marble floors, reflecting in the fountains and pools. The soft scent of jasmine and lotus drifted in from the gardens. She breathed deeply, matching her heartbeat to the river outside, letting the calm of her surroundings sink into her body and mind. And so Cleopatra ruled in her early years, not with haste or frenzy, but with patience, reflection, and quiet strength. She learned that power was not taken, it was understood, navigated, and carried with care. Each day, each observation, each small lesson added to the wisdom that would guide her for the years to come. As the Nile carried her thoughts, her dreams, and her destiny steadily forward. As you breathe slowly, imagining her walking the palace corridors, reading scrolls, observing the gardens, and listening to the river, let your own mind drift beside hers. Let each ripple of water, each rustle of leaves, each soft murmur of the palace carry you gently toward rest, toward calm, toward sleep. Cleopatra's days as queen unfolded like the steady flow of the Nile, gentle, continuous, and quietly purposeful. The river had taught her patience and observation, and now she carried those lessons into the heart of the palace, where courtiers, advisors, and priests moved in their own rhythms, each gesture and word carrying subtle meaning. The court was a world of quiet movement. Scribes traced letters on scrolls, the soft scratch of reed pens blending with the murmurs of conversation. Servants moved through the halls, carrying trays of fruit and bowls of scented water. Lamps flickered in corridors lined with marble, casting soft shadows that shifted slowly like the clouds over the Nile. Cleopatra watched, absorbing the small details. A gesture, a glance, a pause, learning not only what was said, but what remained unspoken. Her advisors, learned men and women who understood both politics and the hearts of people, spoke to her in measured tones. They advised on trade along the Nile, the movement of grain to feed her people, and the collection of taxes to maintain the city's strength. Cleopatra listened carefully, noticing the subtle changes in tone, the shift of expression, the weight of each word. She responded with quiet wisdom, her voice calm, her gestures measured, commanding attention not with force, but with presence. The Nile remained her companion throughout all these days. From her window she could see its waters shimmering under the sun, silver under the moon. Boats drifted slowly, carrying goods from upriver and beyond, fishermen casting nets, the water lapping gently against the banks. The rhythm of the river mirrored the rhythm of the court, steady, flowing, deliberate. In watching it, she found clarity and calm, understanding that power could be gentle, influence could be patient, and leadership could be steady without haste. Within the palace gardens, fountains trickled softly, flowers nodded in the breeze, and the sweet scent of jasmine and lotus filled the air. Cleopatra often retreated here, walking slowly along the paths, letting her hands brush over petals, tracing the veins of leaves. Here she reflected on the counsel of her advisors, thinking carefully, imagining the consequences of decisions not in the form of orders or conflict, but as gentle flows, as changes in the river, as small ripples spreading across a wide surface. Her people, though distant, were always present in her thoughts. She learned about their needs, their hopes, their quiet struggles. She observed the trade along the riverbanks, the movement of farmers and fishermen, the merchants and craftsmen who contributed to the city's life. Each observation became a thread in her understanding, each small act of attention adding depth to the wisdom she carried with calm authority. Evenings brought rituals of reflection. The palace would grow quiet as lamps were lit and corridors emptied. Cleopatra might sit by a fountain, the water trickling softly into a pool, listening to the whispers of the garden and the distant flow of the Nile. She thought of her childhood, of the small lessons learned along the riverbanks, of the tutors and scrolls that had shaped her mind. She reflected on the day's council, the decisions made, the soft movements of her court, letting each thought settle like a pebble, sinking in the river's calm waters. The Nile itself seemed to mirror the pulse of the palace. Boats carried grain and merchandise, fishermen cast nets and drew in their catch, and the gentle flow of water created a rhythm that mirrored the slow, careful order of the court. Cleopatra observed all of it, learning patience, balance, and the quiet power that comes from calm observation. She understood that a ruler's strength was not in haste or loud command, but in measured action, thoughtful response, and steady guidance. At night, she returned to her chambers. She bathed in warm water scented with herbs, draped herself in fine linens, and lay upon cushions arranged carefully upon her mattress. The window was open to the evening air, carrying the soft scent of the gardens and the distant murmur of the Nile. She breathed deeply, matching her own rhythm to that of the river outside, letting the calm of her surroundings sink into her body, her mind, her heart. She thought of the advisors, the courtiers, the priests, the scribes, and the servants, each moving through their own currents, contributing to the steady flow of life around her. She thought of the people of Egypt, the farmers, the fishermen, the merchants, the children running along the banks, the women gathering water, all moving within the river of the world, all connected by its gentle flow. Each night, she allowed herself to drift in reflection, allowing her observations, her lessons, her understanding to settle slowly, like silt sinking to the riverbed. In the hush of night, the gardens and fountains whispered around her, the Nile shimmered in silver beneath the moon, and the palace lay quiet except for the soft movements of life preparing for another day. Cleopatra's mind, though filled with observation and counsel, became calm. Her breathing slowed, her thoughts softened, and she allowed herself to drift, floating gently on the river of memory, of learning, of reflection. And as she slept, the palace, the gardens, the courtiers, and the river seemed to breathe with her. Each ripple of water, each rustle of leaves, each distant murmur carried her deeper into rest. The quiet strength of her early reign was not measured in loud actions, but in subtle understanding, careful observation, and calm reflection. She had learned, even in these first years, that leadership flowed like the Nile, steady, patient, enduring, and infinitely gentle. And now, as you imagine her walking softly among fountains, listening to the ripple of water, observing her advisors and courtiers, and letting the river guide her thoughts, you may drift alongside her. Let the calm flow of the Nile, the hush of the palace, and the gentle rhythm of her days carry you slowly, steadily, peacefully towards sleep. In 48 BCE, Cleopatra found herself at a turning point in her young life as Queen of Egypt. The Palace of Alexandria, with its marble halls, fragrant gardens, and shimmering fountains, had become the stage for her first encounter with the vast world beyond the Nile. Julius Caesar, the Roman general whose reputation preceded him like a distant storm, had arrived at her city. His presence was both imposing and distant, a figure of power and intellect moving through the soft rhythms of the Nile and the palace. Yet Cleopatra faced him with quiet wisdom, patience, and careful calculation. She planned her first meeting with him with deliberate care, understanding that appearances, impressions, and timing were as crucial as words. Historical accounts say she was said to have been smuggled into Caesar's presence, hidden in a rolled-up carpet, delivered to him quietly, a secret moving along the palace corridors. Whether legend or fact, the story reflected her ability to navigate difficult circumstances with calm, clever strategy, her mind flowing like the river, steady and purposeful. The Nile itself seemed to watch over these events, silver under the sun, soft and endless. Cleopatra moved as she had learned to move through life, slowly, observing, noting every gesture, every expression, every subtle shift in the room. She spoke to Caesar in Greek, the language of her court and her family, yet also a language understood by the Roman general, bridging worlds, connecting minds. She presented herself not only as a queen of beauty but as a queen of intellect, of strategy, of awareness. The palace around her was alive with quiet movement. Advisors whispered counsel in hushed tones. Servants passed silently along marble floors. Fountains trickled, and the gardens murmured in the breeze. All of these sounds and motions became part of Cleopatra's observation, teaching her the value of patience, of timing, of subtle influence. She understood that every word and gesture carried meaning beyond itself, and she moved with awareness, letting the calm strength she had cultivated throughout her youth guide her actions. Their meetings were not hurried. They unfolded like the flow of the Nile, deliberate, steady, and measured. Cleopatra listened carefully to Caesar, noting the intonations of his voice, the slight shifts of his expression, the rhythm of his thoughts as he spoke of politics, strategy, and the vast reach of Rome. She responded with care, answering with calm precision, each word measured, each gesture thoughtful. She understood that diplomacy, like the river, required patience, observation, and gentle guidance rather than haste. At night, after their meetings, she would retreat to the palace gardens, walking slowly among fountains and shaded paths, letting the soft murmurs of water and the rustle of leaves carry away the intensity of the day. She thought of her people, of her responsibilities, of the balance of power she was beginning to navigate. She breathed deeply, matching the rhythm of her pulse to the slow flow of the Nile, letting the calm of her surroundings sink into her mind and body. Even in moments of tension, Cleopatra maintained her serenity. She knew that influence came not from force, but from perception, from subtle control, from understanding both the person and the environment. She noticed how the Nile's waters reflected the light, how the breeze carried scents of jasmine and lotus, how the distant city hummed softly with the lives of thousands. Every small detail was a thread in the tapestry of understanding that guided her actions, each ripple a lesson in patience and quiet strategy. The presence of Caesar introduced new complexities into her life. The political currents were strong, challenging, shifting like the tides of the river. Yet Cleopatra moved through them with grace. She studied the nuances of Roman law, the ambitions of the general, and the needs of her own people. She reflected quietly on alliances, strategy, and the delicate balance required to maintain her throne, her kingdom, and her future. Evenings brought the same calm routines. She bathed in warm, fragrant water, lay upon cushions in her chambers, and allowed her mind to drift. The Nile shimmered beyond the palace, silvered by the moon, carrying the reflections of the city and the gardens. She imagined the river flowing endlessly, connecting lands, peoples, and events. She let her thoughts follow the river, floating gently, carrying her concerns, her observations, and her dreams along its quiet current. Sleep came slowly, but peacefully. Cleopatra allowed herself to drift, letting her mind release the tension of the day, letting her body sink into the mattress and cushions, letting the calm rhythm of the river outside her window carry her into dreams. In those dreams, the palace, the river, and the gardens were one harmonious whole. She floated gently, her thoughts softening, her mind quiet, her heart steady. Her first encounter with Caesar was not merely an event, it was a lesson in patience, observation, and the subtle power of presence. She understood that influence was quiet, that leadership required reflection, and that true power could flow like the Nile, steady, enduring, and infinitely gentle. And now, as you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra planning her movements, observing Caesar, walking among fountains, listening to the flow of the river, you may drift alongside her. Let the calm, measured rhythm of her thoughts, the hush of the palace, and the gentle flow of the Nile carry you gently, peacefully, towards sleep. The city of Alexandria had been alive with the presence of Julius Caesar, the Roman general whose mind and influence stretched far beyond the borders of Egypt. Cleopatra had met him with careful planning, intelligence, and poise, navigating her first great encounter with the wider world. Yet, as the days and months unfolded, the inevitable came. Caesar would return to Rome, carrying the currents of his campaigns, leaving Cleopatra once again beside the steady, patient flow of the Nile. She felt the absence of his presence as a quiet ripple, subtle yet undeniable, moving through the corridors of the palace and along the shimmering banks of the river. The Nile flowed as always, calm and endless, yet she noticed the way the light touched the water differently that morning, the way the breeze carried the scent of the gardens with a faint, mournful sweetness. Even in absence, the river mirrored the emotions of the world around her, teaching patience, endurance, and reflection. Cleopatra's days became quiet meditations on the lessons she had learned. She walked slowly through the palace, observing the courtiers, the advisors, the scribes, and the servants. She noted how each movement continued with its usual rhythm, how life persisted steadily even when a presence of great influence had departed. She understood that the flow of life, like the Nile, was constant, carrying past, present, and future together in a gentle, enduring current. The departure of Caesar brought reflection, but not despair. Cleopatra allowed herself moments of quiet thought, walking along the riverbanks where she had once played as a child. She traced the ripples of water with her fingers, imagining them carrying messages, memories, and lessons across the expanse of Egypt. She considered the nature of influence and alliances, the balance of power, and the subtle ways in which presence could shape a kingdom, even in absence. Her chambers became a sanctuary for contemplation. She would sit by the window overlooking the Nile, soft cushions beneath her, the air filled with the fragrance of jasmine and lotus. She breathed slowly, matching her pulse to the gentle rhythm of the river, letting each thought settle like silt in calm water. Memories of Caesar, of their conversations, of the soft cadence of his voice, drifted through her mind, mingling with lessons of patience, observation, and strategy. Evenings were spent in the gardens, walking slowly among fountains and shaded paths. The soft sound of water trickling into pools, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the distant hum of Alexandria settling into night, all carried her into quiet reflection. She thought of her people, of the delicate balance she maintained in the court, of the responsibilities that stretched beyond the walls of the palace. Each thought, each observation, was part of the river of her life, a continuous current flowing steadily toward understanding and calm. She reflected on the lessons of her childhood and youth, remembering the tutors, the scrolls, the languages, the mathematics, and the philosophy that had shaped her mind. She thought of the Nile, its endless flow, its patience, its quiet endurance. She understood that true strength lay not in force, but in observation, in the careful weaving of influence, in the measured response to events beyond one's control. The river had taught her this from the beginning, and now it whispered its wisdom once more in the absence of Caesar. The people of Alexandria continued their lives around her. Merchants traded along the Nile, farmers tended the fields, fishermen cast their nets, and children played on the riverbanks. Cleopatra observed all of this with quiet attentiveness, noting the small patterns, the subtle movements, and the ways in which life persisted. Each observation became a thread in the tapestry of her understanding, each ripple of activity a lesson in the continuity and resilience of the world. At night, she lay upon her cushions, her body supported and her mind quiet. The Nile shimmered beneath the silver light of the moon, reflecting stars that seemed suspended just for her. She breathed deeply, letting the calm of her surroundings and the lessons of her experiences carry her gently toward sleep. Her thoughts of Caesar softened into distant ripples, mingling with the quiet flow of water, the rustle of gardens, and the hush of the palace. She dreamed not of loss, but of continuity. The river carried her reflections, the lessons of diplomacy, strategy, and influence, the careful navigation of presence and absence. The palace, the gardens, the Nile, and the distant city were all part of the river of her mind, flowing endlessly, carrying her forward with calm, steady purpose. In this quiet, reflective state, Cleopatra understood that absence was also a teacher. It reminded her of the steady rhythm of life, the importance of observation, and the enduring power of presence shaped not by force, but by thought, patience, and understanding. She allowed herself to drift with the river, flowing into sleep as the night enveloped Alexandria. The fountains murmured softly, and the Nile carried silver light across the city and into eternity. And now, as you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra walking beside the Nile, reflecting on her first encounter with Caesar, observing the gardens and palace, and letting the river carry her thoughts, you may drift gently alongside her. Let the calm flow of water, the hush of the palace, and the soft rhythm of her reflection carry you steadily towards sleep. The years passed, and Cleopatra's life unfolded like the steady, patient flow of the Nile. After the departure of Julius Caesar, she continued to guide Egypt with quiet wisdom, observing her people, her court, and the rhythms of power. Yet the currents of history moved onward, bringing new challenges and new alliances. Among these was the Roman general Mark Antony, whose arrival in Alexandria marked the beginning of another chapter in her life, filled with both responsibility and reflection. She first observed Antony from the quiet corners of her palace, noting his manner, his presence, and the weight of his reputation. He was a man of Rome, a figure whose influence stretched far beyond the banks of the Nile. Cleopatra, as always, moved with calm purpose. She considered not only his words, but his gestures, his expressions, the spaces between them. Every meeting, every glance, every conversation was part of the river of her understanding, flowing steadily, carefully, deliberately. The palace and gardens became places of quiet companionship. Cleopatra would walk slowly along shaded paths, the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle trickle of fountains accompanying her thoughts. Antony walked beside her in measured steps, speaking softly, listening, observing. They spoke of politics, of strategy, of alliances that stretched beyond the borders of Egypt. Yet even in these discussions, there was space for reflection, for calm observation, for moments of quiet understanding that did not rush or demand, but allowed insight to arise naturally, like the gentle bloom of lotus flowers in the morning sun. The Nile continued its eternal flow, silvering beneath the sun and moon alike. Cleopatra often stood at the palace windows, gazing at the river, imagining it carrying her thoughts, her strategies, her reflections, and even the presence of Antony along its endless path. She observed the boats moving slowly along the water, fishermen casting their nets, merchants trading goods, children playing along the banks. All of this was a reminder of continuity, of the slow, deliberate motion of life that required patience, awareness, and careful guidance. In private moments, she reflected on the nature of influence and trust. Antony was powerful, yet Cleopatra knew that true strength lay in understanding, in gentle persuasion, and in quiet observation. She listened as he spoke, allowing herself to absorb not only his words, but the pauses, the subtle gestures, and the intentions behind them. Their alliance was not only political, it was a meeting of minds, an exchange of careful thought, an understanding that flowed as steadily and quietly as the river itself. Evenings in the palace became times of reflection. Cleopatra would walk among fountains and gardens, feeling the cool water against her fingers, smelling the soft scents of jasmine and lotus, hearing the subtle hum of the city as it settled into night. She thought of her people, of the delicate balance she maintained in governance, and of the presence of Antony, whose influence touched not only the politics of Egypt, but the very currents of her life. The alliance required strategy, careful planning, and measured decisions. Cleopatra considered trade, the movement of grain along the Nile, the relations with distant lands, and the shifting dynamics of Roman politics. She made decisions with calm authority, observing the consequences like ripples on water, adjusting subtly, guiding steadily, never in haste. She understood that leadership was not measured by speed or force, but by the careful navigation of currents, both visible and hidden, and by the patience to observe how each action unfolded over time. Even in moments of tension, Cleopatra maintained serenity. She retreated to her private chambers, lay upon soft cushions, and allowed the gentle rhythm of the Nile to carry her thoughts. She recalled her childhood lessons, the tutors, the scrolls, the languages, and the mathematics that had shaped her mind. She remembered the river's endless patience, the garden's quiet beauty, and the palace's steady rhythm. All of this flowed together in her consciousness, guiding her in the delicate dance of alliance, influence, and reflection. Nights were always serene. The moon shimmered across the Nile, fountains trickled softly in the gardens, and the palace breathed with quiet life. Cleopatra would lie upon cushions, breathing slowly, matching her rhythm to the river, letting the gentle presence of Antony and the lessons of her past settle into her mind. Sleep became a gentle drift, carrying her through reflections on strategy, loyalty, and the subtle power of calm influence. Her alliance with Antony, though grounded in politics, became a space for quiet understanding. Together, they shared moments of observation, discussion, and reflection. Cleopatra's mind, shaped by years of patient study and careful observation, guided not only her actions, but the flow of influence and diplomacy that touched the Nile, the palace, and the wider world. She understood that true power, like the river, required patience, attention, and the ability to flow steadily through challenges rather than forcing them. As you imagine Cleopatra walking slowly through gardens, discussing strategy with Antony, observing the river and the palace, you may drift alongside her. Let the hush of fountains, the soft rustle of leaves, and the gentle flow of the Nile carry you into calm reflection, guiding you steadily, gently, peacefully towards sleep. The life of a queen, Cleopatra understood, was not one of uninterrupted calm. The palace of Alexandria, with its marble halls and gardens, could shelter her body, but never her responsibilities. The currents of power were ever present, like the Nile itself, moving steadily, sometimes gently, sometimes with hidden strength, always shaping the world around it. Cleopatra met these trials with the patience she had learned along the riverbanks of her childhood, moving through each challenge with quiet reflection and measured thought. The court held constant dynamics. Advisors debated strategies in hushed tones. Scribes recorded every decree, and priests reminded her of the sacred traditions she upheld. Her brothers, rivals in blood and influence, required careful observation, subtle negotiation, and deliberate action. Cleopatra had learned, over years of study and reflection, that leadership was an art of patience, that the flow of influence was often invisible, and that the softest ripple could reshape the surface more effectively than a storm. Foreign powers pressed against the borders of her kingdom. Rome's presence, while distant at times, loomed in her awareness. Messages arrived, carrying news of campaigns, alliances, and political shifts. Cleopatra considered each carefully, measuring consequences as a navigator measures the river's hidden currents. She allowed herself to feel the weight of responsibility, then release it slowly, like stones sinking to the riverbed, leaving her mind clear for the next decision. The Nile itself was her ever-present teacher. Boats glided along its surface. Fishermen cast nets, merchants traded grain, and the river carried all of these movements as though they were notes in a symphony of life. Cleopatra walked along its banks, letting its gentle current guide her thoughts. She understood that every challenge, like every ripple on water, could be observed, measured, and addressed with calm attention. Patience, observation, and subtle influence were her most trusted allies. Even the palace walls whispered lessons. The gardens, fountains, and shaded corridors reminded her of continuity and resilience. She moved slowly among them, her fingers brushing petals, tracing the veins of leaves, listening to the soft murmur of water and the distant hum of Alexandria. Each detail became part of a meditation on power, the balance of nature, the rhythm of life, the flow of influence through people and events. Cleopatra faced political intrigues with serenity. Rivals whispered, alliances shifted, and the ambitions of others pressed against her throne. She listened carefully, noting expression and tone, the subtleties of intention hidden in silence and gesture. Her responses were measured, her words precise, her presence calm. She had learned that authority was strengthened not by haste or force, but by quiet observation, careful timing, and the gentle shaping of outcomes over time. Evenings were for reflection. The sun set over the Nile in soft hues of gold and rose, the water reflecting the fading light like molten silver. Cleopatra would walk through the gardens, letting the soft sound of fountains and the rustle of leaves carry her thoughts. She considered the needs of her people, the lessons of history, and the flow of events beyond her control. She allowed herself to drift with these reflections, following their currents as a leaf drifts on water, observing without urgency, understanding without haste. The challenges of governance sometimes weighed heavily, but Cleopatra balanced them with meditation and observation. She considered every message, every visitor, every report with the calm that the Nile had instilled in her. Each night, she returned to her chambers, bathed in fragrant water, draped in soft linens, and lay upon cushions. She breathed slowly, matching the rhythm of her pulse to the gentle flow of the river, letting her mind release tension and drift into quiet reflection. Her dreams carried her through the trials. She imagined the palace, the gardens, the Nile, and the city of Alexandria as a single harmonious whole, moving steadily through time and circumstance. In these dreams, she practiced patience, strategy, and diplomacy, allowing her mind to navigate challenges gently, like a boat guided by the soft currents of a river. Even when faced with betrayal or uncertainty, Cleopatra maintained serenity. She understood that power was not only in action but in perception, in observation, in the quiet shaping of influence. She allowed herself to rest within the continuity of life around her, the soft murmur of fountains, the distant hum of the city, the flow of the Nile carrying silver light across the land. And so, Cleopatra's trials of power were met not with haste, not with anger, but with the gentle endurance of a river flowing steadily through obstacles. She learned, reflected, and observed, turning each challenge into a lesson in patience, strategy, and quiet strength. The palace, the gardens, and the river all became companions in this practice, guiding her through the complexities of life with soft, enduring wisdom. As you imagine Cleopatra walking slowly among fountains and gardens, considering the delicate shifts of power, observing her advisors and the city around her, you may drift alongside her. Let the hush of the palace, the gentle murmur of water, and the steady flow of the Nile carry you peacefully, steadily into sleep. The days of Cleopatra's reign flowed steadily like the Nile, carrying with them both the duties of governance and the currents of human connection. Her alliance with Mark Antony had grown deeper over time, blending the delicate strands of politics with the soft, quiet rhythms of companionship. The Palace of Alexandria, with its marble corridors, shaded gardens, and shimmering fountains, became a place where strategy and intimacy intertwined, where love and leadership flowed together as gently as the river she had known since childhood. Cleopatra observed Antony carefully, as she had learned to observe all who entered her court. She noticed the subtleties of his expression, the way his voice carried weight, the shifts of his posture and gaze. Each detail was a note in the symphony of understanding that guided her diplomacy and deepened her connection with him. She spoke softly, her words measured, deliberate, conveying not only her thoughts, but the quiet strength of her presence. In these moments, love and politics were not separate, but streams flowing side by side, feeding the same river of influence. The palace gardens offered a sanctuary for reflection and conversation. Cleopatra would walk slowly among fountains and lotus pools, Antony at her side, the gentle ripple of water accompanying their dialogue. They spoke of alliances, trade, and distant lands, yet in their quiet exchange there was space for thought, for trust, for subtle understanding. Every word was a careful choice, every gesture a reflection of patience, every glance a bridge between minds and hearts. The Nile, ever present, mirrored the rhythm of their connection. Boats drifted slowly, carrying merchants, fishermen, and travelers. Fish flashed beneath the surface, and the breeze carried scents of lotus and jasmine across the palace terraces. Cleopatra observed it all, allowing the river's patience to guide her responses, to temper emotion with wisdom, and to teach the value of steady influence. The river had always been a teacher, and now it taught the delicate balance of personal connection and public responsibility. Even within the palace, moments of quiet intimacy were deliberate, slow, and reflective. Cleopatra and Antony shared walks along shaded corridors, conversations beside fountains, and evenings observing the moonlight on the Nile. Each shared moment was infused with awareness of the people of Egypt, of the responsibilities of rule, of the currents of Roman politics. Love, in this context, was not hurried or forceful. It was measured, observant, and patient, a steady current running parallel to the flow of governance. Her chambers became spaces of quiet reflection. She would lie upon cushions, surrounded by the soft fragrance of the gardens, listening to the gentle ripple of water in fountains and pools. Her thoughts wandered through strategy, loyalty, and diplomacy, interwoven with the presence of Antony. Each reflection was slow and deliberate, each decision made with the clarity of observation, each plan shaped by the rhythm of calm patience. Even the city of Alexandria seemed to participate in these days. Traders moved along the Nile, children played on riverbanks, and the hum of life carried softly to the palace walls. Cleopatra observed it all, understanding that her choices, both political and personal, flowed outward like ripples on the water. She allowed herself to feel the weight of connection and responsibility, then released it gently, trusting in the calm strength of observation, timing, and understanding. At night, she breathed slowly, her pulse synchronized with the rhythm of the river. Moonlight shimmered across the Nile, silvering the boats and reflecting in the palace fountains. She thought of Antony, of alliances and trust, of the lessons of her childhood, and of the subtle threads of influence she wove through every interaction. She allowed her mind to drift gently with the river, following its current into quiet reflection and rest. Her love for Antony, like the river, was patient and deliberate. It was measured not by intensity or haste, but by awareness, observation, and subtle guidance. Each day, each conversation, each shared moment was part of a continuous flow of understanding, blending human connection with strategy, intimacy with diplomacy. The palace, the gardens, and the Nile became witnesses to this gentle intertwining, reflecting the harmony of patience, wisdom, and quiet influence. And so, Cleopatra navigated the balance of love and politics with serenity. She understood that influence could be gentle, alliances could be subtle, and true connection required careful observation, measured action, and enduring patience. Her heart, her mind, and her presence flowed together like the endless river, steady, calm, and ever guiding. As you imagine Cleopatra walking slowly through gardens, speaking quietly with Antony, observing the fountains, the Nile, and the palace, you may drift alongside her. Let the hush of water, the soft rustle of leaves, and the gentle flow of connection carry you steadily, peacefully, into sleep. Amid the flowing currents of politics and alliances, Cleopatra found moments of quiet reflection in the gentle presence of family. The palace of Alexandria, with its soft fountains and shaded gardens, became a sanctuary where she nurtured not only her kingdom, but the lives she had created. Her children with Mark Antony, symbols of hope, continuity, and the intertwining of Egypt and Rome, became both her responsibility and her solace. She walked slowly through the palace corridors, children at her side, their small hands brushing against hers, their laughter a soft echo of innocence amidst the weight of governance. Cleopatra observed them with the patience and care she had learned along the Nile, noting each expression, each gesture, each subtle movement. They were the next generation of her legacy, a living reflection of both love and duty, carrying the lessons of her life forward like ripples on the river. The Nile mirrored the passage of her days with children. Boats drifted slowly along the water. Fish glimmered beneath the surface, and the breeze carried the scent of lotus and jasmine across the gardens and terraces. She allowed the river's gentle rhythm to guide her, letting the calm, steady flow carry her reflections on parenthood, responsibility, and the passage of time. Each day with her children was an exercise in patience, observation, and gentle guidance. Evenings were moments of tender reflection, Cleopatra would sit beside fountains, her children playing nearby, their voices soft against the murmur of water. She thought of their futures, the weight of history that rested upon their small shoulders, and the world they would inherit. Each thought was deliberate, measured, and calm, like the slow movement of the Nile, carrying potential, possibility, and continuity forward into time. Her chambers became spaces of meditation and quiet teaching. She would gather her children around cushions, telling them stories of Egypt, of the Ptolemaic dynasty, of the Nile, and of the soft lessons carried by rivers, gardens, and palaces. Her voice was steady, her words flowing slowly, as if each syllable were a gentle ripple spreading across their understanding. She taught them observation, patience, and the subtle currents of influence, lessons as enduring as the river itself. Even the palace gardens witnessed these moments. Flowers nodded in the breeze, fountains trickled softly, and the distant hum of Alexandria settled into night. Cleopatra walked among her children, her fingers brushing petals, her eyes noting the movement of leaves, her ears catching the soft laughter and murmur of conversation. All of this became part of a meditation on continuity, growth, and the gentle shaping of future lives. She reflected on the intertwining of her personal life and her duties as queen. Her children were more than heirs. They were living symbols of the balance between love and governance, the delicate harmony of personal and public responsibility. Cleopatra observed the city from her windows, the movement of merchants, fishermen, and citizens along the Nile, and considered how her children would one day navigate the same currents, guided by lessons of patience, observation, and steady wisdom. Nights were serene. She lay upon cushions, the fragrance of gardens and soft linens surrounding her. The moon shimmered on the Nile, reflecting silver light across fountains and terraces. She breathed deeply, her thoughts flowing like the river, considering the legacy she would leave, the guidance she had given her children, and the enduring flow of life she nurtured. Each inhale and exhale matched the steady rhythm of the river, carrying her gently into reflection and rest. Cleopatra understood that legacy was not in grandeur alone, but in the slow shaping of minds, hearts, and influence. Her children were carriers of history, witnesses to both love and leadership, and living symbols of her patient guidance. She allowed herself to feel the weight of their presence, then released it slowly, trusting the continuity of life, the flow of the Nile, and the enduring lessons she had taught. Her dreams, like her days, were filled with gentle continuity. She imagined her children walking along riverbanks, observing the movement of water, tracing the patterns of leaves, and listening to the soft murmurs of the palace. She imagined them learning the same lessons she had learned from the Nile: patience, observation, strategy, and calm endurance. Each dream was a ripple in the river of her life, carrying hope, guidance, and quiet strength into the future. And so Cleopatra's days of family and legacy flowed steadily, like the river she had always known. She nurtured, guided, and observed, blending love and responsibility with calm wisdom. The palace, the gardens, and the Nile were constant companions in this journey, carrying her reflections and intentions gently into time, as enduring as the flow of water and the whisper of history. As you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra walking among her children, observing fountains, gardens, and the Nile, you may drift alongside her. Let the gentle flow of water, the soft murmur of life, and the rhythm of her days carry you peacefully, steadily into sleep. Cleopatra's reign, like the slow currents of the Nile, was never without its challenges. While the river carried the rhythm of her days with steady calm, the world beyond Alexandria stirred with currents of ambition, politics, and uncertainty. Rome, vast and powerful, loomed over Egypt as both opportunity and threat. Cleopatra observed it all with the patience and clarity that had guided her since childhood, moving through each challenge with quiet, deliberate wisdom. The news from Rome arrived steadily, like small ripples traveling down a distant river. Letters, envoys, and reports spoke of campaigns, rivalries, and shifting alliances. Cleopatra listened carefully, noting not only the words but the weight behind them, the pauses, the subtleties of intention, and the hidden currents that might influence the flow of events. She understood that diplomacy required observation, patience, and a keen mind capable of reading between lines, gestures, and silences. The palace, with its marble halls, fountains, and gardens, became a center of careful calculation. Advisors and courtiers presented their counsel in measured tones, their voices blending with the soft murmur of water and the rustle of leaves. Cleopatra observed them closely, noting shifts in expression, the subtle weight of suggestion, and the unspoken ambitions that moved through the court. Each interaction was part of the river of understanding that guided her strategies, every ripple considered and measured before action. Even in the face of threats, Cleopatra maintained calm. She walked through gardens lined with lotus and jasmine, feeling the breeze on her skin, hearing the gentle trickle of fountains, observing birds and fish in their steady rhythms. These quiet moments reminded her that power need not be forceful. It could flow gently, like water shaping stone over time. The challenges from Rome required not haste, but patience, subtlety, and a clear mind. Her alliance with Mark Antony provided both strength and perspective. Together they navigated the delicate balance of diplomacy, strategy, and influence, observing the movements of Rome's leaders and the subtle shifts of public sentiment. Cleopatra spoke carefully, her voice measured, her gestures calm, each action chosen to preserve both her kingdom and the delicate threads of trust and alliance she had nurtured. The palace and the Nile bore witness to this steady guidance, reflecting her patience and insight. The Nile, flowing endlessly outside her windows, mirrored the course of her strategies. Boats drifted slowly, carrying merchants, grain, and travelers, while the river itself taught lessons of endurance, adaptability, and calm persistence. Cleopatra allowed these lessons to guide her responses, letting the steady current of the river shape her understanding of power, influence, and timing. Each challenge from Rome was like a ripple upon the water, observed, measured, and allowed to unfold naturally. Evenings were filled with quiet reflection. Cleopatra walked along shaded corridors, through gardens and terraces, feeling the soft earth beneath her feet and the gentle touch of leaves against her fingers. She reflected on her responsibilities, her alliances, and the ways in which subtle actions could create lasting effects. She breathed slowly, matching her rhythm to the gentle pulse of the Nile, letting the calm strength of observation settle into her mind. The palace chambers became a sanctuary for thought. She lay upon cushions, surrounded by the fragrance of lotus and jasmine, allowing her mind to drift with the river. She considered each report from Rome, each message from allies and rivals, and each possible outcome with the serenity of one who has observed the flow of time and the weight of consequence. Sleep came as a natural continuation of her reflection, a gentle drift into dreams where the palace, the river, and the city moved in harmonious rhythm. Even when Rome threatened openly, Cleopatra remained composed. She understood that authority was strengthened not by anger or haste, but by careful guidance, strategic patience, and the subtle shaping of influence. She allowed the palace, the gardens, and the steady flow of the Nile to teach her endurance, reminding her that true power is as persistent and gentle as a river carving its path through the land. Her thoughts often wandered to the future. She imagined Alexandria enduring, her children observing the lessons she had imparted, and the legacy of Egypt carried forward through steady guidance and careful attention. The challenges from Rome were but ripples in a larger current, navigated not with force, but with observation, wisdom, and measured action. Cleopatra's calm presence, like the river itself, shaped the course of events quietly, subtly, and enduringly. And so, Cleopatra met the challenges from Rome with patience, strategy, and serenity. Each day, each observation, each reflection became part of the river of her life, guiding her through political currents with quiet, enduring strength. The palace, the gardens, and the Nile bore witness to this wisdom, carrying it gently through time, like a slow, steady current flowing to the sea. As you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra walking through gardens, observing the palace, listening to the ripple of fountains and considering the currents of Rome, you may drift alongside her. The years passed like the slow, steady flow of the Nile, carrying Cleopatra through moments of triumph, challenge, love, and reflection. The Palace of Alexandria, with its marble halls, shaded gardens, and trickling fountains, remained her sanctuary, a place where she could observe the world and prepare for the legacy she would leave behind. Even as the currents of history pressed upon her, Cleopatra moved with patience, her mind attuned to the lessons of the river and the quiet rhythms of life around her. Mark Antony, her ally and companion, remained a presence in her days, though the weight of political currents often separated them. Cleopatra observed, listened, and planned with careful attention, understanding that leadership required both presence and patience, both intimacy and strategic thinking. Their alliance, strengthened over years, now demanded delicate navigation as Rome's ambitions continued to ripple across the Mediterranean. She walked slowly through the palace gardens, her fingers brushing the petals of lotus and jasmine, the soft murmur of fountains accompanying her thoughts. Birds moved quietly through the trees, their wings stirring the air gently. The Nile shimmered beyond the palace walls, carrying boats, merchants, and travelers steadily along its course. Cleopatra reflected on these rhythms, allowing the river's patience and endurance to guide her approach to leadership, diplomacy, and personal reflection. Her chambers, filled with soft linens, cushions, and the fragrance of flowers, became spaces for contemplation. She considered the lessons she had taught her children, the legacy of her family, and the delicate balance of power she had maintained. Every decision, every interaction, every observation was measured with care, like the gentle flow of water shaping the contours of stone over time. She allowed herself to feel the weight of history without being burdened by it, trusting the steady course of wisdom she had cultivated over her life. Evenings in Alexandria were quiet, yet filled with reflection. The sun set over the Nile in soft gold and rose hues, the water catching the fading light and reflecting it gently across the city. Cleopatra walked along terraces, observing the river, the city, and her palace, noting the continuous motion of life. She understood that leadership was not only about control, but about awareness, subtle guidance, and patience, all flowing steadily like the currents of the Nile. The children of Cleopatra and Antony were ever present in her thoughts. She reflected on their futures, the inheritance of lessons, wisdom, and resilience she had imparted. Each child was a ripple in the river of her life, carrying forward her legacy, her understanding, and her presence. She allowed herself to breathe deeply, letting the soft rhythms of the palace, the gardens, and the Nile settle into her mind, shaping calm strength for the days ahead. The final years were also moments of reflection on love and companionship. Cleopatra recalled the quiet moments with Antony, the careful planning of alliances, the conversations beside fountains and along shaded paths. She understood that intimacy, like leadership, required patience, careful observation, and gentle guidance. Each memory was a ripple in the flowing river of her life, soft and steady, carrying lessons and reflections into the present. The Nile, flowing endlessly beyond her windows, mirrored her understanding of time and continuity. Boats glided along the water, fishermen cast nets, and merchants carried their goods steadily to distant shores. Cleopatra considered these movements as a metaphor for her own life, the persistence of influence, the endurance of wisdom, and the quiet shaping of legacy. She moved slowly, deliberately, allowing herself to be guided by the rhythm of the river, the palace, and her own inner strength. Nights were moments of gentle meditation. Cleopatra lay upon cushions, breathing slowly, feeling the soft linens and the fragrances of the gardens around her. She let her mind drift with the rhythm of the Nile, imagining her decisions, alliances, and reflections carried gently along its waters. The city of Alexandria, the palace, the gardens, and the river became one harmonious whole, supporting her in calm contemplation, reflection, and rest. Even in moments of tension, when political or personal challenges arose, Cleopatra remained serene. She understood that influence was not seized in haste, but cultivated through patience, awareness, and gentle guidance. Her reflections carried her beyond immediate concerns, toward the enduring currents of history, legacy, and wisdom. She allowed the flow of time, like the Nile, to shape her understanding, carrying her steadily toward her future. And so, Cleopatra's final years were lived with quiet reflection, calm endurance, and measured wisdom. She balanced love, leadership, and legacy with the gentle patience of one who had observed the river for a lifetime. The palace, gardens, and Nile carried her reflections steadily, guiding her through the currents of life with serenity, insight, and enduring grace. As you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra walking through gardens, observing the river and palace, reflecting on her children, her love, and her legacy, you may drift alongside her. Let the hush of water, the soft rustle of leaves, and the steady flow of life carry you peacefully, gently, into sleep. The final days of Cleopatra's life moved with the quiet inevitability of the Nile flowing toward the sea. The palace of Alexandria, bathed in soft sunlight or silvered by the moon, became a place of still reflection. She walked slowly through the marble halls, touched the petals of lotus and jasmine in the gardens, and listened to the gentle trickle of fountains. The river outside mirrored the rhythm of her mind, steady, patient, and infinitely enduring. Her thoughts often wandered to the flow of her life, the currents of events she had navigated, and the lessons she had absorbed from the river, the palace, and her people. She considered her alliances, the moments shared with Mark Antony, the children she had guided, and the legacy she would leave behind. Each memory, each reflection, moved through her mind like a gentle ripple across calm waters, quieting the heart and softening the edges of urgency and fear. Even in the shadow of approaching endings, Cleopatra maintained serenity. She observed her court and advisors with calm eyes, giving measured guidance and listening carefully to their counsel. The city of Alexandria moved around her in its steady rhythm, merchants trading along the Nile, fishermen casting nets, children playing along riverbanks. These ordinary flows of life reminded her of the continuity of the world beyond personal circumstance, and she allowed their quiet steadiness to carry her thoughts. The palace gardens offered solace. Cleopatra walked slowly among fountains and shaded paths, her hands brushing petals, her ears attuned to the soft murmur of water and the subtle rustle of leaves. Birds moved quietly among the trees, and the scent of jasmine and lotus filled the air. In these moments, she reflected not only on power and duty, but also on the beauty and simplicity of existence. Each breath, each step, each gesture became a meditation, a rhythm matching the gentle flow of the Nile. Her chambers became spaces of rest and reflection. Surrounded by soft cushions, linens, and the fragrance of flowers, she lay quietly, letting her mind drift through memories and lessons. She recalled the faces of her children, the presence of Antony, the advisors who had guided her, and the people of Egypt, whose lives were carried by the steady currents of her leadership. Each thought was deliberate, slow, and peaceful, like the ripple of water stretching across a quiet pool. The Nile continued to teach. Boats drifted along its surface, carrying grain, merchants, and travelers. Fish flashed beneath the water, birds skimmed along the banks, and the breeze carried scents and whispers across the city. Cleopatra observed these movements with a calm mind, understanding that life, like the river, flowed steadily toward the future, carrying both joy and sorrow in equal measure. She allowed herself to feel the gentle rhythm of time, embracing the inevitability of endings with the patience and serenity of one who has observed the world closely. Evenings were quiet. The sun set slowly, gilding the river in gold and rose, casting long, soft shadows across the palace terraces. Cleopatra walked along these terraces, feeling the cool air on her skin, listening to the distant hum of Alexandria and reflecting on the course of her life. She thought of decisions made with care, of alliances formed with patience, of lessons imparted to her children, and of the gentle strength that guided her through the currents of history. As the nights deepened, she lay upon her cushions, breathing slowly, aligning her pulse with the steady rhythm of the Nile. The moon shimmered across the water, fountains whispered softly, and the gardens sighed in the gentle breeze. Cleopatra allowed her thoughts to drift, flowing calmly through memories, lessons, and reflections. She embraced the quiet understanding that life, like the river, was a series of flowing moments, each connected to the next, each shaping the course of time with gentle persistence. In these last days she found peace in continuity. The palace, the gardens, and the Nile bore witness to her calm presence. She reflected on the endurance of her people, the lessons she had imparted, and the strength cultivated through years of careful observation, measured action, and quiet influence. Even as endings approached, she felt the steady current of life beneath her, carrying her reflections gently toward a natural conclusion. And so, Cleopatra's last days were marked not by haste or fear, but by quiet contemplation, patience, and serenity. She moved slowly, observed keenly, and allowed the rhythm of the Nile, the soft murmur of fountains, and the gentle flow of life to guide her thoughts. Her presence remained steady, her mind clear, and her heart calm, carrying the lessons of a lifetime into the gentle embrace of eternity. As you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra walking through gardens, resting beside fountains, observing the shimmering Nile, and reflecting on her life, you may drift alongside her. Let the hush of water, the soft rustle of leaves, and the steady, gentle rhythm of existence carry you peacefully, steadily, into sleep. The life of Cleopatra, like the timeless flow of the Nile, continued to echo through history, long after the last moments of her days in Alexandria. Her story, filled with wisdom, patience, and quiet influence, had been shaped by rivers, gardens, palaces, and people, carrying lessons that stretched beyond her lifetime. In the calm reflection of her legacy, the world seemed to flow gently as the Nile itself, a river of memory and meaning, flowing from the past into the future. Cleopatra's children carried forward the threads of her life, living embodiments of love, strategy, and continuity. They moved through the palace gardens, learning the subtle rhythms of observation and patience that had guided their mother. She had taught them to notice the gentle flow of water, the rustle of leaves, the soft hum of life around them, and the enduring importance of measured action and careful thought. In them, the river of her influence continued, each ripple spreading further with quiet persistence. The palace and gardens remained as silent witnesses to her wisdom. Marble halls, shaded terraces, fountains, and lotus pools reflected the calm presence she had cultivated over years of reign. Visitors, courtiers, and advisors carried memories of her voice, gestures, and quiet authority. They had witnessed the careful navigation of alliances, the patient observation of power, and the gentle shaping of influence. These subtle currents of her presence flowed onward, much like the river flowing beyond the city, touching lives far beyond her immediate sight. Even the Nile itself seemed to remember her steps along its banks. Boats drifted slowly, fishermen cast their nets, and the river's gentle ripple carried reflections of her wisdom, patience, and calm authority downstream. Cleopatra had learned from the river, and in turn, the river reflected her legacy, the persistence of influence, the subtlety of guidance, and the quiet endurance of thought. Each ripple, each shimmer of light upon the water, was a reminder that life, like the river, continues beyond any single moment. The people of Alexandria remembered her not only as a queen, but as a presence of steady influence. Her attention to their lives, her careful guidance, and her awareness of the rhythms of the city and the river left an imprint that persisted in stories, traditions, and memory. She had balanced the currents of love, politics, family, and duty with calm strength, shaping a legacy that endured like the river's flow, slow, deliberate, and infinitely enduring. Even in reflection on the broader sweep of history, Cleopatra's life appeared as a calm current, threading through the tumultuous waters of her time. She had navigated the presence of Julius Caesar, the alliance with Mark Antony, and the pressures from Rome with patience, observation, and quiet wisdom. She had nurtured her children, guided her people, and cultivated understanding in the face of uncertainty. Each action, each choice, flowed together into a river of enduring influence, leaving lessons carried forward by those who came after her. The palace gardens with their fountains and shaded paths became symbols of this enduring legacy. Cleopatra had walked among them slowly, deliberately, reflecting on strategy, life, and love. Each step she took was a quiet meditation, each glance a reflection of observation and thought. The gardens whispered her presence, the fountains murmured her patience, and the lotus pools reflected her enduring calm. These spaces, like the river itself, carried the echoes of her wisdom through time. Her final reflections were gentle and measured. She imagined the Nile flowing endlessly, carrying memory and meaning, love and strategy, reflection and influence. She understood that life was not measured solely by grandeur or conquest, but by the quiet persistence of thought, the steady shaping of influence, and the calm endurance of presence. Each ripple of her life, each measured action, became part of a river stretching beyond the present, touching future generations with subtle, enduring wisdom. Even the night seemed to honor her legacy. The moon shimmered on the river, fountains whispered softly, and the palace breathed in gentle rhythm. Cleopatra's thoughts drifted with the flow of water, reflecting on life's continuity, the lessons she had imparted, and the presence of her influence in the world around her. Her legacy, like the river, carried forward slowly and steadily, touching all who observed, remembered, or were guided by her wisdom. And so, Cleopatra's life became an eternal current, flowing through memory, history, and reflection. She had balanced love and politics, family and leadership, presence and patience, shaping influence with quiet strength. The palace, the gardens, the Nile, and the city of Alexandria bore witness to her wisdom, carrying it forward in gentle, enduring motion. As you breathe slowly, imagining Cleopatra's presence flowing through gardens, palaces, and along the shimmering Nile, you may drift alongside her. Let the hush of water, the soft murmur of fountains, and the steady, gentle rhythm of the river carry you peacefully, steadily, into a deep, calm sleep. Thank you for listening to Sleepy Stories tonight. I hope this tale has brought you comfort, calm, and a step closer to rest. If you enjoyed this story, you'll find many more gentle journeys into the lives of remarkable figures from history, each told softly, to ease your mind and help you drift off. You can explore the full playlist of Sleepy Stories whenever you'd like, or simply let the next video play, and I'll guide you through another soothing chapter of the past. Until then, may your night be peaceful, your dreams gentle, and your sleep deep. Good night.